During Jose Mourinho's stint as Manchester United manager, he made this iconic rant.
This is football heritage.
He complained that Man United, and specifically the board above him, weren't investing properly in the playing squad at the club, leading to the side that were once the most successful in English football history, falling behind their rivals. Understandably then, in December 2023, when Jim Ratcliffe's INEOS group bought a 27% stake and thus control over footballing decisions at the club, Man United's fans were delighted, taking to social media with claims that they were back. Yet, after another £200 million was spent this summer, United are once again no better off, and if anything are in an even worse position than they were this time last year. And so, with the club spending already reaching a dangerously high level, could Ratcliffe's influence be the final straw that sinks the once great ship? Manchester United weren't always a club in shambles. Founded in 1878 as Newton Heath FC, the club famously wore green and gold kits until in 1902 when Newton Heath became Manchester United and the green and gold shirt turned into the iconic red one we know today. Over the years, Man United then began to grow in size and popularity, with success soon following, where under Sir Matt Busby the club became the first English side to ever win the European Cup, the continent's greatest honour, and under Sir Alex Ferguson they became the most successful club in English football history, having won a record-breaking 20 First Division titles. Although, despite this success and growth into a global powerhouse, the club always remained connected to their humble origins. For example, in the 94-95 season they paid homage to their now iconic green and gold strip, and they'd also pretty much always been run safely, never spending beyond their means and staying out of debt until in 2005 where everything changed. Malcolm Glazer was a businessman from New York, known for his shrewd and sometimes immoral business techniques. Having made millions over the 20th century, he decided to turn to sport in the mid-90s, purchasing the NFL side Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 1995. By 2003, he'd managed to more than triple the value of his investment, and so he wanted to expand his sporting empire into not only the world's biggest sport, but arguably its most profitable organisation in Manchester United. Following 2 years of Malcolm Glazer slowly buying shares in the club, a boardroom disagreement over a racehorse quickly exploded into a more serious altercation, with the Glazer family using it as an opportunity to seize full control. The Glazers wanted to use a leveraged buyout to purchase the club, meaning that instead of using their own money to pay for United, they instead withdrew a loan, putting the debt onto the club rather than themselves, allowing them to take over without spending a single penny of their own money. Once supporters found out about this method though, protests were quick to pop up, with the club's fans donning green and gold scarves as a reference to the club's working class origins, contrasting with the foreign corporate greed they saw the Glazers as representing. Regardless, the buyout would take place, and the Glazers now owned Man United over the coming 18 years, putting the club into more and more debt whilst taking heavy dividends payments themselves, as well as overseeing a total collapse on the pitch. For the first 8 years of Glazers' ownership, manager Alex Ferguson and CEO David Gill were able to hold the club's on-pitch success together. However, after they both departed in the summer of 2013, things started to fall apart. Edward Woodward, an investment banker from Chelmsford, took control of footballing operations at the club despite having no relevant experience, and so unsurprisingly, things quickly took a turn for the worse. Over the next 10 years, the club burnt through as many managers as they had in the previous 43, and fell from 13 league titles in 20 years to an average league position of 5th. The club squad also went from being the best in England to one struggling to qualify for the European competitions. Unsurprisingly then, fan pressure on the Glazers grew and grew until in 2022, when they announced that they'd be opening offers for new investment and a partial takeover of the club. By February 2023, the race had narrowed down to just 2 potential suitors: Sir Jim Ratcliffe, owner of the INEOS group, and Qatari Sheikh Jassim bin Hamad Al Thani. Eventually, in December 2023, Jim Ratcliffe won the race, purchasing 27.7% of the club for £1.25 billion, announcing he'd also be taking over control of the footballing operations. Alongside Ratcliffe came Sir Dave Brailsford, mastermind of the Team Sky and later Team INEOS cycling domination of the 2010s, who had been made Director of Sport at INEOS in 2019 ahead of their €100 million takeover of French side Nice. Alongside this, former Juventus and PSG PSG executive Jean-Claude Blanc, who had been made CEO of INEOS Sport in 2022, also joined the team. And once Ratcliffe had completed his purchase of Man United, the INEOS group wasted no time in bringing some new faces to the club's leadership structure. In January 2024, Omar Barada was announced as the chief executive of the club, followed up by Jason Wilcox as technical director and Dan Ashworth as sporting director. Each of these appointments came with previous experience and success in similar roles elsewhere, and so for the first time in over a decade, Man United seemingly had a leadership team which could facilitate success. They did have one problem though, which was in the dugouts. Erik ten Hag had joined Man United in the summer of 2022, having taken Dutch side Ajax to a Champions League semi-final and a first place finish in each of its 4 full seasons in Amsterdam, with his first season in Manchester overall being seen as a good one. A 3rd place finish in 2 cup finals, one of which they would win, not only found them back in the Champions League, which comes with lucrative prize money, but had also seen them end an almost 6-year-long trophy drought under the Glazers. His second season, however, was looking far less successful. Having spent over £350 million in just 2 seasons, Ten Hag led Man United to a dismal 8th place finish in the league, their worst in 35 years, and despite guiding them back to a 2nd FA Cup final in a row, fans were now calling for his dismissal. And this is where we saw the first major error INEOS have made. Over the previous decade, Man United's image had been tainted by poor decisions, public arguments and leaks, something that was expected to be cleaned up after Jim Ratcliffe's ownership. However, in his first major decision at the helm, these affairs that had plagued United for years on end struck once again. Just days before the FA Cup final, it was leaked that regardless of the result at Wembley, INEOS had decided Erik ten Hag would lose his job. Of course, a media circus then ensued, with nearly everyone at the club from the board down to the players questioned on the matter, something that doesn't exactly allow for a healthy working environment. Against all odds though, United beat City rivals and reigning FA Cup and Premier League champions Manchester City in the final, leaving INEOS with a huge decision to make. If they kept Ten Hag, media fanfare around any poor performances down the line would just be exaggerated by the knowledge that he was supposed to have left. However, if they did choose to sack him, it would send out a message to the world that there were still huge holes in the club's environment. Eventually they made the decision to keep Ten Hag, and not only that but also hand him a 1-year contract extension, making it more expensive to fire him if they wanted to do so down the line. It was a potentially expensive gamble, the exact kind of thing United had been doing for the past 11 years, and the exact same thing that Ratcliffe and co had claimed would no longer be seen at Old Trafford, a point I wanted to emphasise further when we look at Man United's business in Ratcliffe's first summer in charge. United once again spent huge this summer, however failed to address many areas, with their £200 million haul leaving them light in both midfield and at fullback, as well as the players they've brought in not really matching the profile the squad needs. These signings have led to Man United currently being 14th in the Premier League table, with Erik ten Hag once again on the verge of being fired, and so you have to ask, how much of INEOS actually learned from the Glazers' failure, and how likely are they to take United back to the top? Sure, INEOS have other ventures within sport, but not many have been overly successful. Since they took over as the main sponsor of the INEOS Grenadiers cycling team, they've fallen from 6 Tour de France wins in 7 editions to just 1 in the 6 years since, which came in the first edition after their takeover. Furthermore, their ownership of Nice hasn't exactly caused many ripples in France, with the club currently yo-yoing between 5th and 9th place finishes in their years under the INEOS regime, and so with questions being asked of INEOS Sport elsewhere, I think you'd be forgiven for questioning whether these big money signings are actually a part of the huge rebuild required in Manchester, or if they're just a continuation of the Glazer policy that has found United where they are today. Not only that, but away from football, Ratcliffe has made decisions that have pulled the club even further away from their humble origins, the opposite of what was expected from his acquisition of the club. Despite feeling free to dish out millions a week on players' wages, he felt providing stadium staff access to a meal was costing the club too much, so he decided to cut it. As well as this, a further 250 members of staff have been made redundant in under 1 year of his stewardship, amongst them a club historian who'd been at the club for almost half a century, and the club's greatest ever manager Sir Alex Ferguson, who recently lost the administrative role he'd been holding at the club. The fact is, many of the problems people have highlighted under Glazer ownership of United haven't disappeared, and if anything, they're only becoming more extreme. That being said though, as much as I've been very critical of INEOS and Jim Ratcliffe throughout this video, there is still many things you have to give them credit for. £50 million has been invested into the club's training facilities and academy, Old Trafford is expecting a much needed upgrade, and the senior management at the club is now, on paper, one of the best in the world. But if Jim Ratcliffe and his INEOS group want to bring Man United back to the level of years gone by, they should start using these assets smartly, rather than falling victim to the flashy reputation the club has earned itself over the last decade.